Welcome to the All Things DER podcast, brought to you by AEIC. In this podcast, we dig in, define, and discuss where the new energy economy is heading with electric industry leaders and explore all the ways that distributed energy resources can modernize and improve our ever-evolving power grid. Thank you for joining us.
In today's episode, I'm talking with Alan MacAnespie, the Principal Innovation Specialist at Baltimore Gas and Electric. We discussed the importance of out-of-the-box thinking while maintaining a disciplined approach to innovation that fosters creativity and drives the new energy economy forward within a company. From integral ways that innovation brings value to a company and the need for a cultural mindset shift, we dig into a variety of ways to continually make leaps towards cleaner energy and fostering innovative thinkers for the next generation of the power industry. Welcome, Alan. So I'm very excited about this episode that we're about to embark upon. I just want to take an opportunity to introduce yourself before we get started.
Thanks, Liz. My name is Alan MacAnespie. I'm the Principal Innovation Specialist at Baltimore Gas and Electric, which is a company that's under the Exelon family of companies. I am part of the innovation team at BGE and been working at BGE for about almost a year and a half. And originally, before that, I was at corporate innovation at Exelon, and before that, I was at Constellation, which has recently separated away from Exelon. All in all, I've been with the same company for about 21 years.
Well, what I'm excited about with this episode is, we've been talking a lot about all things DER, distributed energy resources. And in our last episode that I recorded, it was really this idea that because of the merging technologies, it's really creating a space where us utility folk need to really start thinking more innovative and having these opportunities to really engage. So from your perspective, why is innovation so important for Exelon? They're a regulated utility.
Well, I think that there's a number of things that are really useful in sort of understanding why innovation is important. Yes, a utility can get away with just doing their bare operational activities, and in many cases, the technology is the same as it was 100 years ago. You may want to have a little more electronics. You may want to have a little bit more awareness and communications. Certainly connectivity is going to be there. And you can get away with being a utility that is functionally operating with the oldest technology available. However, that's not going to get you in this world where now people are expecting services. They're expecting the Silicon Valley kind of mentality of constantly iterating, constantly changing, constantly upgrading, and providing new capabilities. It's not necessarily new areas of business, but perhaps looking into ways in which the customer can get their services met, maybe customer response can be better. And then, of course, we get into the reliability aspects of how can we improve reliability? How can we be improving the infrastructure? What are some of the things that the $1 trillion infrastructure bill that's been moving through and looking at ways in which we can improve infrastructure of communications, utility services, infrastructure of roads and bridges? We have those same kinds of things that are essential for life. And in the United States, we consider that electricity is, a fundamental right. That means we need to be able to keep the system up and running. With new sophistications and changes that we're having coming at us on the grid, distributed energy is going to be a big impact, of fundamentally changing impact. And we're going to have to evolve. We're going to have to understand, what does it mean when you have utilities that are not only serving big generation that's pushing down to the utility customers, but what about utility customers that start generating power at the edges? The feeders and the infrastructure and the substations are going to have to understand and know how to handle this distributed energy. Solar power is going to change fundamental things. The concepts of battery vehicles that are now storage. We explore and we look into ways in which not only are we going to try and reduce the emissions of our own company and from the operating standpoint, but ways in which we can encourage and even incentivize customers to be reducing emissions on their own. We have a very large activity that's going on at Exelon that's called Path to Clean. And it's an expectation that we're going to be going carbon free. And we have a timeline for it. So by 2030, I think we're going to be half of our emissions that we were before. And by 2050, I think the intention is to be going to zero carbon. That's a big deal for a utility company to try and come up with a way that we're going to have such a positive impact and reduce our footprint that's there. We're not going to get there by 1910 mentality. We're going to have to change. We're going to have to innovate. And the ways in which we get there are not going to be the traditional project management activities and looking at long-term planning and some of the bureaucratic mechanisms. We're going to need out-of-the-box thinking. Now, it doesn't mean that innovation is not disciplined. Innovation is a spark, and it's an intention, and maybe there's an acceleration, and maybe there's a cadence that's much, much faster. But the idea that you're just doing things willy-nilly is not true. And that's where my team comes in, is that we help guide people through an innovation process, but we also do it with some discipline. So we do it in ways in which we're not going to be adopting technology that's going to be frivolous. We're not going to be adopting technology or methods, because innovation is not always about just technology.
Yeah, so you're the innovation group, and kind of what I heard is like there's so much happening really at the edge, from the generation to the transmission to the distribution down to the edge. How does a utility that has been really focused over the last 40 years to embrace the loss of the commodity they actually are here to sell, to now suddenly embracing this new edge technologies, the emerging technologies from all aspects? So innovation, I know, is a very broad topic, just like all things DER.
Mm-hmm.
So like, for instance, you just said, you guys are doing very disciplined. What is considered to be innovation within Exelon?
Well, we have a really good batch of criteria, and technically my group is actually called Emerging Technologies and Innovation. So one thing is to kind of first to address the concept of what is innovation. Well, innovation is not about just technology. Innovation is about doing something new. And maybe it's doing it in a new way. And sometimes it's about process. In a couple of cases, we've had some really fantastic innovations in which we're using very old tools or technology, but we're using it in a fundamentally new way. That's still innovation.
Right.
So it's not about just finding the latest widget or the latest technology or the latest materials about what's going on. But when we're looking at ideas and trying to determine as to whether it's just incremental change or what we call continuous improvement versus something that's innovative, we have 5 criteria that we use. The first is that it's new and novel to the company, and it's going to have business impact. It can't just be new, and it can't just be something that's kind of cool. It needs to bring value. Notice I say the word value there and not cost savings or not money. Sometimes the value is about the safety of the employee or the safety of the customer. Sometimes it's about environmental impact, and those aren't necessarily going to be low cost or zero cost. They may be something that requires investment, but it's going to provide value to the company that's there. So new and novel to Exelon, and has some kind of business impact that is positive. We want it to be more than incremental from the current solution or the product or the process that's going on. We want it to be a leap ahead, and something that is, in many cases, is that it's going to be higher reward, and it's potentially going to have some higher uncertainty. If it's really just going to be the next logical step that's there, it's like, okay, maybe it's a part of an innovative activity that's going on, but maybe it's not going to be as big a change that we would want to have if we're trying to really leap ahead or really think out of the box. Making a slightly bigger box can sometimes be innovation, but sometimes it's just improvement on what you're doing before. We also look at it as, is it going to potentially be adding market value to Exelon? Is it going to be something that is improving our standing or improving our reputation? Or is it ways in which it's helping our footprint? Maybe it's providing new opportunities for business that would be allowed under the regulatory models. Are there ways in which that innovation can be a game changer for the company? Lastly, could it be perceived by customers or stakeholders as being innovative? There are times in which we do activities like I'll do seminars for STEAM or STEM sessions where everything from elementary schools to college age, and I love doing talking moments and teaching moments. I have 2 teenage daughters myself, and being able to engage with them and show them that there are cool jobs out there that are not just doing the same old, but it is about thinking ahead and thinking about ways to change. But then I flip the model on them and I say, look, lots of people tell you that you can follow your passion and you can find a job that's doing that. But really what you should be doing is bring your passion to whatever it is you're working on.
Definitely. I just have to say, if you think about the electric utility space, I'm a history buff and I love to think about how far we've come, but really like, where did innovation stop? So if we think about like, as our grids were built, ultimately the utilities and the owners of the assets actually manufactured, created, developed. And it wasn't until we went big and better and then more, and it really innovation in the utility space, we started giving that away to really the vendor world and manufacturing. And really we stopped innovating in really the 70s, 80s. So it's fascinating that here's a time where, one, I think it's really important that we, in this space, it's a win-win-win, right? We are the wires, we are the generators, and we're the ones that understand how it has worked. And we're the only ones that really can help bridge that gap of where we need to go. So like, just knowing that, a utility such as Exelon is really embracing innovation is super exciting. And so again, like for those outside the industry looking in, because it's such a large topic, and really you don't want to put bounds on creative thinkers, right? And that's like kind of the hard part about embracing innovation, is really how do you create metrics or performance for out-of-box thinking or creativity. So you have to have a special place for it. So how do you bring those or develop an idea that comes from wherever in your organization and create that innovative solution?
Well, we have a methodology that we use, and we in many cases we attempt to take projects from one stage to another. That as you're going through and developing an activity or you're developing a project, we have a tool that we use that's called Reinvent. It's something that we helped to develop, and it's now maintained by another company. But that's part of that innovative model, and we've partnered with a company. We developed a tool that would be useful for us, and then we release it. We let it go to others who might be able to multiply and to be able to take advantage of it. But in our case, we walk through this methodology, and we go through that. We start out with a general concept. We let people kind of walk through and develop things with their peers. We want them to be talking with their managers and their coworkers and try and come up with, what is this approach? What is the method in which we would want to take whatever this innovation is and go to the next steps, next stages. In many cases, a project team or a group that wants to be able to move forward with an innovation, especially if it's something that's really ambitious, they don't have the time or the budget to do it. There are companies like Google that talk about the 10% or 20% rule, in which they're expected to spend one day a week or half a day a week working on something that's innovative. We don't have the mandate that says you must do. We give the opportunity to say, if you can do, or if you want to do. We sometimes have a budget available that says, look, bring this project to us, see as to what's going on. We maybe have funding that would be available to let you do some implementation. In a few cases, those people may actually step away from their regular job and work on these innovative activities. Most cases, they're doing things that are part of their expertise and part of their job description. So in many cases, we're able to give them the opportunity that we'll take care of the capital funding, or we'll work on how you can buy the materials, or buy the equipment, or buy the device or the tool that you might be looking at doing. And in some cases, we're doing things that are really ambitious. There are times where we've done large scale activities, like one that's fairly recent, that's quite a success story, has been bringing in heavy duty electric vehicles like semis and bucket trucks and large scale electric vehicles that allow us to replace the diesel or the natural gas systems that we've been using. And that allows us to then know what's the next stages in terms of what our fleet's going to do. Now, we're not going to replace 600 vehicles with new electric vehicles overnight. The infrastructure is not there for charging yet. The ability for us to understand all of the capabilities of what to do during storm situations or when the grid is down, and what our storm restoration activities are. So there's a logical migration that would be happening, but this is potentially a multi-million-dollar activity and project about what's going on. So we do small pilots. Let's get one vehicle or two vehicles. Let's pilot those. Let's get them out into the field. Let's work with the crews to understand what are ways in which we can refine this. How can we change some of the activities? So that exploration of getting the funding going and launching a pilot is really what we do. We don't tend to pay for the scale or for the full production version of any of the activities that we're working on, but we work on helping them develop that minimum viable product, or that Silicon Valley activity of thinking of, can I build a prototype enough to get a pitch deck going? Or can I build a prototype enough to justify, so that leadership who understands the long-term strategic goals can say, this fits, this is something we should do. Let's allocate funding. Let's bring this to our Public Service Commission and say, here's how we're going to be solving this long-term or large-scale problem. And so those innovative solutions then come into play, where we do these pilots, we work through, we evaluate what value it's bringing back. We actually reward our employees for bringing projects that have what we call outcomes that are, and we love baseball here, so we will talk about single, double, triple home runs. And those are showing what kind of impact or what kind of value individual projects are bringing to the company. As I said before, are there safety improvements? Are there ways in which it's bringing cost savings? Are there methods in which we can be reducing customer outages or customer durations? So those activities and those outcomes then come along with rewards. And we have methods in which we can provide, gift card type of rewards to employees. And sometimes it could be substantial.
That's awesome to hear. And I think, from those outside looking in, the amount of visionary leadership and kind of standing up this type of ideology within a regulated utility space is no easy win. Because, if you think about it, we are an industry where we're flying our jumbo jet and we're being asked to replace out the engine in flight. And to be able to do that, we know that everyone has their day job and they're there to maintain the safety, the reliability, and affordability of the grid, but just creating that energy and that awareness and that change management control that yes, this is all very important and it is our staple and it is how we make our operations run, but we have to be moving this along. So creating that innovation space, I think, is pivotal to really all of us being successful. And it's a way, that we can really engage our third parties and our vendors and the whole other industry that wants to support this drive that we're really, we're being asked to always and forever the safety of the grid. We're the ones that, need to ensure that when this stuff connects, it's connecting and ensuring the safety of our workers as well as the public. Now we're on top of increased reliability, literally 99.9% expectation that their lights will be on at all times here in North America or the US. We're being asked to reduce carbon emissions. And then this whole new word, I think it might not be new, but kind of new, resiliency. We have metrics and incentives to be reliable, but now what is the cost and what are we willing to pay for this aspect of resiliency? And that's new for us to show up. So there's multiple facets that we must continue. How do you think having all these multiple strategic initiatives, safety, carbon emission reduction, improved grid resiliency, fits into this innovation mindset?
Well, I think that one of the benefits that we have in our company that's really kind of extraordinary is that innovation really is driven from the top. In a lot of cases, when you look at the models of companies that are succeeding at innovation, in many cases, it's set as an example from the top. It is driven and builds from the bottom, and it meets in the middle. And it's typically middle management are the ones that are the most resistant to innovative change or are looking at innovative projects, because they're the ones that are getting these mandates to say, you got to get your job done, or you got to get these processes happening. And you got employees coming to you saying, I got a better way to do this. And you're saying, hey, I've got these deliverables that happen. So we actually go through a lot of cultural discussions, and we actually have leadership training that's mandated, that they are trying to understand, how do you lead innovators? How do you provide with delivery of the items that you need to have? You've got to deliver that reliability. You have to deliver that safety message. You have to deliver that concept of, I'm getting the job done and I'm going to be there. And yet you need to be handling all of these innovation ideas coming at you, the diversity of thought that's happening, and the means in which you can take that team and move to the next stage of how you're going to do your management model. So the concept of all of the other strategic initiatives that are happening, innovation is not a noun, it's a verb. it's a process in which you're going to get somewhere. And the way that if you consider that innovation is an end goal, then you're missing the boat. Innovation is going to be the means or the tool or the adjective in some ways in terms of how you're going to get to changing the way that you're doing your business. If you have leadership that's doing strategic innovation, then they are thinking out of the box in terms of, okay, utilities have this mindset in terms of where they are doing for delivering energy from the source generator to the end customer. And oh, by the way, the end customer didn't know what their bill was until maybe 45 or 60 days after they consumed it. So how are they going to change their behavior? To now, you've got consumers that are seeing the awareness of their power usage down to the minute. And there are apps and there are other kinds of sensors and tools that are available on the consumer level that are fundamentally changing the way that consumers are behaving. You multiply that by several million, and now you have a different model of how the grid is going to behave. So your capacity planning teams now have to adjust. Your infrastructure build outs have to be something that's adaptable and understand as to how the growth is going to change. It's no longer going to be the simple mechanism of, I've got this many houses, that means this many feeders, this many substations, and this many transmission lines that are happening. Now you have to understand the nature of those, and you have to kind of figure out how is the fundamental world of charging vehicles, or the possibility that you're going to have wind or solar or other sort of intermittent sources that are going to be providing power. And then what storage is going to be happening, not just the advances in battery technology, but the possibility of other kinds of energy storage. Pumped water is something that's been around for a really long time, but now they're looking at things like mass storage, hoisting masses up into elevations or up inclined planes, and potentially having that at the residential level, or having that something that a farmer does because he's got a little bit of extra land, and it used to be that he sold land for cell towers. Well, what if he starts selling land for mass storage? This is game changing in terms of how we think about this. So the company that thinks that innovation is not part of what they're doing all the time is either only thinking tactically, because in many ways, strategic thinking that's going to be long-term and successful is going to be innovative strategic thinking. So that mindset, and as I say, we are so blessed with the fact that our innovation program comes from the top. We have deep involvement with our management teams that are constantly asking about what's going on, seeing how they can inject enthusiasm and inspiration into the programs, and to be able to provide the rewards and the incentives to be able to make things happen that are these game changers, as I said.
So definitely what I heard, innovation is a mindset. It's like, it's not a recipe, right? And innovation requires leadership, right? And I love that visual, and it's so true, is like, because that middle management is required and responsible, right? You have to really do a cultural shift change, right? I think the really exciting part is I'm obsessed with the whole idea of growth mindset versus fixed mindset. Dr. Carol Dweck, she wrote a book about it, but really infusing that energy into the utility space is like one of my passions, as well as just sharing it with others, especially our next generation, right? That the utility space is where we can really cultivate and empower these creative thinkers and really give them an opportunity to change the utility, change the world kind of feel. And that's where I sit, and gives me goosebumps to talk about. But, with a workforce, right, that we know spans generations and the various backgrounds and experience, is what I'm hearing, we have to include innovation. So is there anything specific Exelon's doing, understanding that generational gap and that change? And
that certainly is the fascinating thing that I love working in is, in the structure of the company, we have the idea of continuous improvements just going to be the day-to-day activity about what's happening in terms of improving every single day. Innovation projects that we do, not just the innovation mindset, but the kind of the operational tactics of how we work through innovation projects, we really look for the next couple of weeks to the next 2 to 3 years. If we try and go much further out than that, then we're starting to look at real speculative type of things. And that's where you start getting into research and development. And that's actually a part of our team, that we have a research and development group that handles fundamental technology and fundamental research. So if you get out into the 3 to 5 and the 5 to 10 year, now you're starting to look at strategy, and you're starting to understand, okay, what are the fundamental marketplace changes? What are the incidental deriving forces that are coming at you? And some of the speculative activity that you need to figure out in terms of positioning your company to navigate into those next 5 to 10 years. But I love also the aspect of, we also have sustainability and understanding, how do we go to the next 10,000 years? How are we going to have so that we're not impacting the environment? How are we having it so that sustainability is also about workplace sustainability? How do you have that workforce that is sustainable? How am I going to be recruiting new people into the company that think this is a really cool place to be? You know what? Well, one of the great parts of our group is that we also handle our drone team. They're doing inspections. We're now starting to work on storm duty and being able to fly drones over areas where there may be storm damage and quickly assess where the difficulties are going to be, without having to troop through the snow or to go in through the areas where it may be dangerous because there's still conductors on the ground. But if you consider that you could have a drone team and you have these 5 or 10 or 20 pilots that are going out and they're getting dispatched out into the area, but you're still kind of encapsulating that inventory of innovation about drones. So what BGE does is we do what we call creating drone qualified employees, DQEs. And anyone in the company, and I mean it, anyone in the company can come out, go to our training grounds. We have an area that's set up where we train people on how to fly responsibly. We sponsor them to go through the FAA drone test, and we get them qualified as an FAA drone pilot. And then they are then given a drone, and then that's part of their tool set. If he's a transmission line mechanic, if he's a distribution lineman, if he's working as a fleet operator, if he's doing things that's part of storm assessment, or if he's working on mutual assistance coordination, that we have crews that we're coordinating other employees or other utilities that are coming in to help with storm restoration or in preparation for a storm. We can use drones to maybe assess what the area is that they're going to be mustering all of those trucks and all those vehicles in the inventory. Well, why have that be just a single team? So we put it out through everybody. We infiltrate that technology into all the parts of the company. So now it's not just one story about doing an innovative activity. It's dozens of stories that are all coming up individually with multiple use cases. So now it starts to infect everybody with the enthusiasm, and you've got an organic growth that can sometimes be explosive.
Well, that is awesome. And I have to say, you definitely gave me a few ideas to go back to my day job and share. So I just wanted to kind of round out what I've heard. It's one of my favorite quotes is, what we have to learn to do, we learn by doing. And so being in this space that we're in, we must do so that we can learn and really share the knowledge and really grow us as, an entity that really serves the lifeline of society, which is electrical power. So I just want to thank you again for your insightful thoughts. And I know that our probably paths will cross in the future as we continue to innovate within this space.
Well, happy to. And, I think the fact that I'm in a job that I absolutely love, this is the best job I've ever had. And the main reason because of it is I am so insatiably curious. I am a consummate learner. I always want to learn things. And this job gives me a chance to go and be with experts and learn from them in all these different fields. So like you're saying, this growth mindset is the thing that's going to bring that passion and bring that enthusiasm. And so if I've inspired you to do some things, then that's made my day, because that's what I really want to do all the time.
Awesome. Well, you definitely have. And I think we are kindred spirits. So with that, I love to learn and share as well.
Yeah. Thank you so much for having me.
That's a wrap for this week's episode of All Things DER. Thanks for tuning in. We hope today's conversation got you thinking about new and creative ways to improve our power grid. Be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel to be the first to hear new episodes. This podcast is brought to you by AEIC, the place where operations leaders come together to share knowledge and provide guidance to the electric utility industry. We'll be back with a new episode soon. Until then, keep powering on.